Okay. You sure?
When are we supposed to go?
Excellent. Well, look, it's my pleasure to be here today to chair today's panel where we're going to be talking about, quite rightly as colleagues said, around ESG, greener financing, but we're going to take a slightly different tact. You see, ESG is known in many, many different ways, but what we're going to talk about is the practicality of it when it comes to SME and access to finance. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first two panelists. Firstly, Heather. And Michael. How are you both? You well?
Really good, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Excellent stuff. So before we really get into kind of the weeds of discussion in the time that we have today, what I'm going to give both our panelists is just the time just to talk a little bit about themselves and who they are, and then we're going to really deep dive straight into this kind of SME conversation because access to finance is a subject that we know for many, many years has been a challenging one for SMEs. But certainly in this greener time, in this more inclusive time, things need to change. So Heather, I'd like just to give you 30 seconds just to tell the world about who you are.
30 seconds. So my name is Heather Cobb. I'm the SVP for Member Engagement at Tide. Tide is the leading business and financial admin platform here in the UK, so we serve exclusively an SME audience. And I'm really excited to be part of this conversation discussing some of the fantastic stuff that we are trying to do to be a more inclusive space for those that have aspirations to be entrepreneurs, existing business owners, particularly at the small end of that scale. So looking forward to this discussion in truly an amazing venue.
That's a great venue, isn't it? Absolutely. Michael.
Hi everyone. My name's Mike Bristol. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CrowdProperty. We're a specialist residential development finance business, and our sort of mission is to unlock the potential of small and medium-sized residential property developers in the UK who were notably underserved by traditional sources of finance. And that takes, and predominantly because of the cost to serve in that market. And so we broke that down, driven by technology, but also expertise and also a different customer proposition to enable us to empower them to build more homes in this country, which we're not very good at doing.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because the importance of people belonging and having a sense of belonging is very important. And but I think the way that you do it is very, very unique. But Heather, I want to come to you first and foremost because, as we know, the world of financial inclusion has evolved. There's a traditional way people have looked at inclusion, but now it should be a more natural part of today's business. But I'd like to ask you, in terms of your experience, you obviously embrace digital banking and have a very clear perspective around how you use that to support financial inclusion. But in terms of, I guess, an opening question for you, I guess, what would you say would be practical strategies that financial institutions can implement to support SMEs better, particularly when it comes to inclusive practices?
Yeah, so look, really good question and indeed something I do believe in very strongly, and I'm really excited, as I've said, to be at Tide who are taking concrete steps in this direction. So, I've touched on 10% market share, so for us that's 1 in 10 small business owners in the UK are on the Tide platform. So we're really proud of our 580,000 members. What we know from that group is just how diverse they are. So Tide at the smaller end of the scale, we're dealing primarily with business owners that don't have a formal finance function, but within that, that's huge. So that's sole traders, that's registered businesses, that's across a huge range of industries. So already there's diversity in there. I know that's not strictly what we're talking of here, but it does give us the potential to go to our member base and learn more. So we do that on a regular basis. We know that 31% of our base do come from ethnic minority backgrounds. We know that 25% are women. Those stats are higher than national averages, but obviously point to, a fair distance to go. And so then the question becomes, well, what might we be able to do to help? And I think to do that, we need to, again, go more granular, better understand what some of those needs are. So we've been, real champions of women in business, for instance, commitment to helping 200,000 women here in the UK, 500,000 in India. And as part of that wider initiative, what we launched in February this year was our first Female Business Owners Index. So what we heard back in doing that research, so this was close to 500 of our female members telling us something about them and their business journey. What we heard was that roughly a third were putting growth ambitions on hold given high interest rates environments. We heard about the challenges associated with high energy costs, about challenges potentially in accessing finance, not being clear on what they needed to do to help with some of those payments. We also heard in a different tact, in some cases, not feeling confident in their own skill set, not sure that they had the right network, the right people to contact for help and advice. And so with some of those insights, and I should point out that in spite of that, 75% did say they were optimistic about the future. So I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but I do mean to anchor on this and say, well, what can we do with those insights? And I'll give you just two examples.
Sure.
You know, on the first one, that challenge of accessing finance, and that's something I think that's been touched on in a number of different sessions. But Tide were delighted last year to welcome Funding Options, our SME lending marketplace, into Tide. They took that nugget or that insight, and they're in the process of creating a content series, small digestible pieces of information, but how to help female entrepreneurs, how to help entrepreneurs in general, you know, think about the type of finance, when might they need financing, what's the right way to go about applying for said finance, what happens if you hit some stumbles in that application process. So really making that easy and anchoring to that specific insight that we heard. Another one, my last example on this one, I promise, but in terms of some female business owners telling us they didn't feel confident in their own skill set, we've been really fortunate to partner with MasterCard, who run a wonderful program called Strive here in the UK. They bring together content from amazing partners such as Be the Business, Digital Boost, Enterprise Nation, and that can be a lovely way for any of our members, you know, as well as small businesses in the UK more broadly, to tap into their content, get support with a digital plan, get support with a business plan, tap into a network of mentors. So that's not going to solve everything that you've asked me about, but it puts us on the right step, and it feels like a genuine place we can take action.
Exactly what I was going to say, because I think it's about that understanding and have that tailored approach to whomever you're working with. And I know, Michael, with yourself, in terms of your work, that's exactly what you do. You focus on those SME developers and not getting access to the support that they need. And I would suggest that most people don't really think about SME developers when we're talking about financial inclusion. But how do you see the world at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, generally, perception-wise, there aren't many violins playing for property developers in this world. But that's rather unfair when you think that the average home contributes around about £100,000 to the economy, average home being built, in terms of labour, materials and services. Actually, when we narrowly missed recession by sort of second decimal place points, that was the equivalent of 750 homes being built. So, you know, construction is material, residential construction is material from an economic standpoint, from a people and population and livable standpoint. But fundamentally, and it's no sort of surprise to anyone, that the government will come out and say, well, we need to build 300,000, 340,000. The numbers vary somewhat. But the only thing that the UK is spectacularly good at doing is building 200,000 homes a year. And that's fundamentally a problem. Now, where that really rests is, we all know there are volume house builders out there, but they're developing out what fundamentally is scarce, large tranches of land. The entrepreneurial developer can look out of any window, okay, not great in this particular place, and say, I can put 2 homes there, 10 homes there, 20 homes there. So the opportunity is there, and 30% of house building supply in 2007, purposely taken, was from SME developers, and that rapidly shrank to around about 10% of supply. So really the secret for building more homes for this economy and for our population is in small and medium-sized developers, right? But that is expensive to serve, and so you have to apply technology, you have to build specialist systems, you have to build specialist propositions, and we've built our entire business around just that asset class to provide for. And that has grown us into a go-to lender in that space for ground-up and significant development opportunities. We've backed now £840 million worth of and property value, around about 3,600 homes, but we see that as just the start. Our technology platform has just been built out to sort of commence serving that market very, very well, which is also served poorly by many in a non-scalable, non-tech underpinned manner. And therefore, you know, we see huge opportunity to grow that, to provide more capital from many different sources of global and also UK capital into house building in the UK, that has clear benefits for many.
It strikes me that the commonality between you both is the use of technology and its application in providing much more tailored approaches and support to whomever your group is. But what would you say are the challenges for the wider finance sector to embrace inclusion more in terms of the future of the industry?
That's a big question.
It's
I
a
don't know
massive
that I
question.
have those answers.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I think, and more than that, I think it's just such an incredibly important question, right? So SMEs, as sort of, and I wrote my stats here, but three-fifths of employment in the private sector, 50% of revenue generated in the private sector, so hugely impactful. And the stat that really sticks with me, and I'm still on why this is so important, but is one that says that we would add 250 billion in value to the UK economy if women were creating and scaling businesses at the same rate as men. So just, to me, that speaks of such a strong call to action. Collectively, what can we do in this space? And I think I don't have the answers. There isn't one silver bullet out there. To me, I would go back to those themes of really understanding what are some of the obstacles or the challenges that folks in underrepresented groups today are facing, and what are the smaller actions that we can take, you know, in spaces where we have a real right to play, and ladder that up to something bigger. And that can be as, you know, small steps of going to where they are. We know entrepreneurs are always super time pressed, so how do we take the great content that's there, distill it into small videos on TikTok? And that's not, you know, TikTok because it's trendy, but it is where young entrepreneurs go for information. So can we share the information there? Can we showcase other entrepreneurs like them that have succeeded there? Do these things start to help? So it's a tough question, so I'm going to pass to you.
Look, from our perspective, inclusivity is simply leveling the playing field for SME developers to compete in a market and make economic sense for them to compete in a market to deliver house building, right? And in order to achieve that, you need to, you know, one key cost base is finance cost, because, you know, property development is a risky undertaking and therefore has a cost to bear on that, and our sources of capital expect that given that risk profile. Our responsibility is to distribute that as efficiently as possible, and that is what can open up that market.
I think what I would maybe add to that is the reality that this is an age-old conversation as well, isn't it? In the sense that we know the importance of inclusion in the space. We know that FinTech has the opportunity to really drive that forward. And so I guess the only addition I would ask is, how do we, as leaders and practitioners in the space, really try and drive this through at a root cause level? Otherwise, we'll be having the same conversation in another 10 years' time. And I'm not asking you for the answer, but it certainly begs the question that this is not a new conversation. And in your respective worlds of the work that you're doing, you're tackling that problem as best that you can. But you are part of an ecosystem. We all need to come together and drive that forward at a much more practical and a deeper level, I would say.
No, I mean, completely echo that, and I think there is something to be said for making those public commitments and then taking the action behind. So again, no one entity can possibly address this on their own, but I would point, in Tide's case, you know, to that public commitment of women in business. You know, we want to help and support 200,000 women start and scale their businesses in the UK by 2027. We have many ideas of how we are practically going to do that, and some we know we will work with the women that are using our platform to develop that out together. And I think that sense of, to a degree, putting your neck on the line and saying, we massively believe in this, we know it's really important, we are going to take action, is important.
And on that note, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I think the overarching message I'm hearing is that we can all do our part, no matter how small, so just start and just do the best that you can, but do it in collaboration with others. So I'll allow you just to say thank you to our guests. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.